True events from South Korea served as inspiration for the movie. The protagonist, the eminent physician Jung Tae-Hoon, is presented right away. Because of how skilled he is in the operating room, he is constantly in demand. However, Jung still finds time each day to spend with his loved ones. He's married and the father of a cute little boy of 5. His life is turned upside down one day, unfortunately. A sudden breakdown strikes when his youngster is swimming at school. The youngster is rushed to the hospital, where his condition is deemed to be life-threatening. Surprisingly, he is unable to breathe since his lungs have hardened to the point of becoming inoperable. Jung is caught off guard because his son seemed okay the night before. Strangely, despite his medical expertise, he couldn't detect any signs. But that's hardly the end of Jung's concerns. Later that night, his wife came back to the house to get some items, but she abruptly passed out on the floor. Her life support had failed by the time rescue comes. Within a matter of 12 hours, Jung's kid and wife have both inexplicably fallen, and it has shaken him to the core. So he decides to do an autopsy on his wife to get some answers. While doing the surgery, Jung is seen visibly shaking with emotion, yet he manages to get through it and reach a resolution. Surprisingly to everyone, she has suffered damage to both lungs, signifying that she also suffers from the same disease that has put their son into a coma. Pulmonary fibrosis is a disease in which there is extensive scarring of the lungs. Extreme coughing, weakness, and lack of appetite are typical symptoms. However, Jung's family suddenly fell apart. The situation now becomes much stranger. About 3 months ago, his wife performed a standard health checkup, and everything was okay. After learning that it is practically impossible to get pulmonary fibrosis and die within 3 months, Jung is left in complete shock. The mournful Jung afterwards carries her last rites and pays her respects. Han Yang-yo, an attorney, is there too. She is his sister-in-law. The two are too busy sobbing to have much of a conversation. Despite everything that Jung has been through, he returns to work the next day. During a roundtable discussion, one of the physicians reveals that unusual cases of pulmonary fibrosis had been reported before. 5 years ago, there was a rash of reported instances. A well-known doctor from a different city supposedly authored articles about the issue, however, they were never published. After hearing this, Jung resolves to consult a doctor about the mysterious illness he has been warned about. He arrives after a lengthy travel and is greeted by the doctor. After a brief introduction, the latter pulls out a report from his file and reveals that he has previously recorded over 100 such incidents. He even went so far as publishing publications on the topic, but the authorities paid him little heed. As a result of this, he stopped trying and stopped his study entirely. When Jung inquires as to whether his patients have any characteristics, the doctor explains that most of them became ill during the spring. This suggests the root of the problem lies in the previous winter's activities. Isolating the problem, Jung compiles a list of pulmonary fibrosis victims' families. His next step is to write an individual letter to each person, in which he specifically requests details on the illness's manifestations. Unfortunately, after a week, I still haven't heard back from anyone. Since he has no other choice, he decides to pay them all a visit. Initially, he goes up to a man named Ping who has recently lost his wife and 2 little children. When Jung sees that he has turned into a drunk, he doesn't press the issue. He then visits an elderly woman's home, where her daughter is clinging to life with the assistance of a respirator. Pulmonary fibrosis has taken hold of the woman, and it looks that she does not have very long to live. Jung probes her thoroughly, but he comes up empty. At home that night, he gets vivid dreams about his family. But Jung notices that even in the visions, they are coughing heavily. When he takes a closer look, he sees steam rising from a humidifier. It was at this point that Jung came to his senses, recalling that both the old woman and Ping had humidifiers in their dwellings. Because these items are typically employed during the colder months, he concludes that they are to blame for the unexpected mortality rates. He doesn't waste any time getting in touch with the KCDC, Korean Centers for Disease Control, to inform them of the issue. Since Jung is such a well-known and esteemed physician, the KCDC executives choose to assist him despite the suspicions that have been circulating. The following scene takes place at Jung's home, when an experiment is done to determine whether or not the humidifiers are the true cause of death. After many rats are confined in a cage with an open humidifier for a full day, they will become ill. To further deter any potential interference with the experiment, multiple cameras have been strategically positioned around the room. The findings are revealed the next day. A worker at the KCDC calls Jung and his sister-in-law Yang and tells them that the experiment was a failure since all of the rats perished. Pulmonary fibrosis caused a rapid collapse of their lungs. The KCDC worker continues by saying that the cause of death wasn't excess humidity or mold growth, but rather the intake of a toxic chemical known as PHMG. This material is reportedly cleaned with a biocidal disinfectant. Amazingly, a very high quantity of PHMG was discovered in the room. Not surprisingly, Jung is taken aback by the discovery, given that he has no recollection of how the object got there. He hastily returns home and begins searching through his belongings for hints. After some digging, he comes upon an image of a mysterious substance named Spotless. A flashback occurs as he looks at it, and he learns that Spotless is a disinfectant for humidifiers. His wife bought it after seeing it advertised. When Jung saw that the product had been sanctioned by the Korean Ministry of Health, he loved it even more. On the next day, Yang makes an effort to leverage her position to bring O2, the maker of Spotless, to light. She composes an essay and presents it to her manager, only to receive criticism in return. His argument is that they should not take such a chance because if their predictions turn out to be wrong, they would be in deep danger. Yang persists in going against the grain and trying new approaches. To generate buzz, she draws on her network for assistance. She also distributes hundreds of flyers decrying O2 for being a murderous corporation. The strategy succeeds and the news is reported by the media, which then circulates it widely. This causes a lot of stress for O2's top brass, therefore it takes them forever to provide a formal response. Somewhere else, we meet Chen, the proprietor of O2 and the nefarious company's genius. He's an egotistical Briton with a product to market in Korea. His indifferent attitude toward his staff is made clear by the way he communicates with and treats them. His sole concern is expanding his firm and making more money. Chen calls his helper, Seo Woo-shik, to deal with the matter. After conversing for a long, it becomes evident that cleanliness is actually hazardous to your health. In any case, Chen doesn't give a hoot, and he begs Woo-shik to figure out a solution ASAP. He stands to gain the job of Chief Executive Officer, CEO, with a successful outcome. Woo-shik is pumped up and starts to work after hearing this. We also learn that Yang has left her previous employment and relocated to a new apartment in order to better focus on her inquiry. Since O2 has repeatedly refuted the murder accusations, the matter has been brought before a judge. Even though Yang is a talented lawyer in her own right, she realizes that O2 would retain top-tier attorneys to fight her case. Therefore, she goes to see Byung-suk, a distinguished lawyer and one of her old teachers. He is rumored to have contested over 100 cases without defeat. Yang requests for his assistance eagerly, and even gives him the case file, which contains the incriminating evidence against O2. Byung-suk skims it and adds, "I'll think about it." When Yang finally arrives at her place, she learns that Byung-suk will not be joining their cause after all. Because of this, he has no alternative but to handle the situation by herself. At Jung apartment Yo's that day, Jung and a few co-workers are having a discussion, and later that day, many other people come to offer their support. The majority of those impacted by the pristine disinfectant are those who use it. Seeing his work bear fruit fills Jung with joy. They are later gathered together as Yang gives a moving speech. She says that a violent business has ruined her family, and yet they refuse to accept responsibility for their acts. She goes on to say that the lawsuit may demand a large sum of money, but that Jung would be sponsoring it on his own, so there is no need to worry. In response, they all begin cheering enthusiastically and vowing to continue their struggle against O2 until their very last breath. When the big day arrives, it is the culmination of months of preparation. The court hearing has begun, and representatives from both sides are there. With the help of his aide Woo-shik and a team of top-notch lawyers, Chen has a strong legal team on his side. All of Jung Family Yo's members as well as Jung are here today. The court will soon be asking Yang to present her findings at trial. But before she can get started, Chen's top attorney shows up. It turns out that he is actually Byung-suk, Jung's tutor. He betrayed her trust by selling her case file to Chen for a tidy sum of money. Because of this, Yang has an uphill battle, since her opponents may counter her arguments with ease. Byung-suk then takes the stand and asserts without hesitation that his client is completely innocent. He offers to provide the judge's proof by having a toxicity test done on the disinfectant Spotless. The hearing can be postponed until after the procedure is complete, which will take a few weeks. Despite Young Bestio's efforts, the judges ultimately decide to grant Chen and his group's request. The court date has been pushed out 3 weeks. Yongyo goes to see a well-known scientist to gain his endorsement because their prospects of winning the case are dwindling. She would like him to tell the judges that spotless is a deadly chemical that can quickly wipe out an entire population. After some consideration, the scientist, who is also an activist, accepts. The government scientist who will conduct the toxicity test on spotless is scheduled to meet with Chen's assistant, Wu Shik. He offers him a big sum of money in exchange for modifying the reports, which he accepts. Later that night, the Jung visits the hospital and finds Wu Shik sitting next to his comatose kid. Concerned, he yells at the stranger to go, but Wu Shik has brought a deal. In exchange for Jung dropping the case, he offers Jung's son a fresh set of healthy lungs. After passing an envelope to Jung, Wu Shik exits. A little while later, Jung sits down next to his kid and rips open the envelope. "Sorry, kid, I just can't do it," he apologetically explains. We then move to the following trial, where young scientist Yo's acquaintance is also present. He will be asked to testify in court shortly. The group listens in anticipation as he confirms their worst fears. Spotless does, in fact, contain the extremely dangerous drug PHMG. Congestion, coughing, and even death from lung failure might result from not treating it quickly enough. This tips the scales marginally in Young's favor, but at that moment, the defendant's counsel, Byung-suk, enters the room, brandishing an article. The chemist sees it and is forced to read it out for him. In a surprising turn of events, the chemist really wrote the 2004 essay himself. According to the report, PHMG poses no health risks. Therefore, Chen's team regains the initiative. The bribed government chemist's turn comes around after some time. As anticipated, he tells a fib about the toxicology findings, claiming that they came back negative and proving that spotless disinfectant is entirely safe because it does not contain hazardous amounts of PHMG. Another member of Young Team Yo's was there during the experiment, so he's confident in his results. The infected's loved ones are understandably shocked by this news and are probably wondering who betrayed them. A quick Google search reveals that it's really Young. But he insists, albeit with a heavy heart, that everything went according to plan and that no foul play was involved. This results in a victory for Chen and his firm, O2, much to Young's chagrin. The next day, Chen throws a huge celebration in honor of his supporters. The scientist who was meant to assist Yongyo is one of them. It's clear from this that Chen paid everybody who stood in his way. The following scene takes place at the airport, where Chen is getting ready to board a flight back to London when a group of police officers surround him. He demands rudely that they move since he's late for a flight, but the police officers tell him he can't take off today because he's on the no-fly list. Chen is taken aback by this and swiftly deduces that he has been exposed. Meanwhile, Wu Shik is catching up on the news and learning that O2 has been uncovered. As it turns out, the government scientist made up the lab report he provided. Unexpectedly, he begins to sob heavily, and a flashback ensues. Pulmonary fibrosis caused by breathing in the toxic air claimed the lives of Wu Shik's ones, as well. Although he knew Chen was to blame, Chen never admitted it. Because of this, Wu Shik resolved to send him to prison in some capacity. When Jung tore the envelope at the hospital, he found a picture of Byung-suk with his family, as seen in a flashback. Because of this, he instantly saw that Byung-suk is a victim as well. So he reached out to him and they set up a meeting. Together they decided to videotape Spotless's toxicity test in secret and then turn over the footage to authorities. Everything went according to plan and Chen is currently doing time in prison. After receiving new lungs, Jung's kid and his family begin to have a normal, healthy life. The film concludes with a scene showing thousands of protesters gathering outside of Parliament. They want the government to pay for allowing dangerous products due to carelessness. Through the closing credits, we learn that approximately 20,000 individuals in Korea lost their lives and almost 1 million experience health issues.